Hello, students. Let's continue the discussion about this study with the research question. Does auditory distraction decrease recall or memory? All right. So, in other words, if there's a sound playing while you're trying to memorize something, will you memorize less or will it be impeded because of the auditory distractors? Okay, that's the research question, and the aim again is that to find out if auditory distractors influences or affects a recall or memory. And then the hypothesis is yes, it does. And just restate or paraphrase the sentence. The IV, or the one that is causing the effect on the memory, is the auditory or sound distraction. The dependent variable is what you want to measure, what you want to observe, and what you think will be affected. In this case, it's quite simple. It's the memory. It's the performance in the memory task or memory test. Then you have two groups, 15 the experimental group, 15 the control group, much higher average much higher average of correct answers in the control group because they didn't experience any distraction, and in the experimental group, significantly lower, but not bad, right? In other words, auditory distraction significantly decreases your ability to retain information or to remember or to recall towards the end. All right, so that's about it. And we talked about extraneous variables that could affect the results of the study in a way that makes the findings or the conclusion invalid, right? But in some cases, the good researcher says in the procedures that I'm controlling some variables, making sure that it is standardized or the same in both conditions to make sure that I have a clean experiment. So let's read what a control condition is. A level of the, so a control condition is the control group, right? That you compare to the experimental group. But there are what we call control variables. Let me just write it here. So when we say control variables, I'll give you an example. That's when the researcher says, I'm making sure that in the experimental group and in the control group, they have the same instructions, right? Standardized instructions. They have the same lighting in the room. Lighting. And for the memory task, which happens in the phone, they are using the same device. All right? And then for the auditory distraction, we can use headphones so that the volume of the sound is the same for all respondents. So you're using headphones or earphones, and it's all, let's say, 80 decibels, or the level of volume, or how loud it is. Why? Why is this important? Because remember, if this is the room and here are the chairs, right? If the sound is just coming from one speaker, right, you can expect less impact from the person sitting here compared to the person sitting here, right? Because there's a difference in volume. But to standardize that, to make it a control variable, you can just wear headphones. So what you controlled in the experiment is actually the volume, right? Volume of the auditory or sound distraction. I hope that makes sense. All right. Okay, now let's move on to the next slide. So that's the end basically of the study, auditory distractions affecting memory. Now let's go to this study. Do you have any idea what this is? It's called the Stanley Milgram experiment. Now this experiment was inspired by historical accounts. So during World War II, you probably are aware of the events that happened in Europe and to the other parts of the world wherein Nazi Germany occupied different countries and did war crimes, and a lot of people died, right? And the key factor in the supposed quote unquote success of Nazi Germany was the obedience of Hitler's uh, second and third in command, his officers, his generals, right? Were following his orders, regardless of how heinous they were. Heinous being very bad, very, very genocidal. And he was wondering, will people just follow orders even though they will harm other people? Even though the orders or the pressure is to harm another person, will people still follow it? Just people in general, not just bad people, but people, you and me. Are we going to follow the bad instructions? Well, that's what this study is about, all right? So let's look at the experiment setup, and maybe we can gain some insight from this setup, all right? So this is the test taker. Well, this is the participant, okay? And the participant was given this instruction. So this participant was paid a certain